The suspension of the Indus Water Treaty is beginning to have real consequences. Images have been released on the public broadcaster talking about how the water flow on the Chenab River has been curtailed. This is one of the many calibrated military and non-military options that India is exploring as it seeks retaliation and justice for what happened in Pahalgam, the Pahalgam terror attack. Now, I have spent the week on the ground in Jammu and Kashmir, reporting from the line of control to the Wular Lake, which is one of the key projects that has always been a bone of contention between India and Pakistan when it comes to the Indus Water Treaty. We have brought you ordinary voices from the ground, not just in Pahalgam, but from across the Kashmir Valley. And there's no doubt that this is an inflection point, both for the country and within Jammu and Kashmir. To discuss what India's next steps will be, we'll be joined in a moment by a very special guest. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. Our relentless coverage of the aftermath of the Pahalgam terror attack continues. You can see in those images our report from the Wular Lake in Kashmir's Bandipora district. This is stunning and breathtaking, yes, but it has also been at the heart of a raging fight between India and Pakistan when it comes to the Tulbul navigation project. Well, now those battles have taken a very distinct turn. As part of the suspension of the Indus Water Treaty, the public broadcaster Doordarshan has released images that talk about curtailing the water flow on the Chenab River to Pakistan. Now, remember the day I was in fact at the Wular Lake, Pakistan basically threatened that it would strike India if there was any attempt to build a structure that contained the flow of water to Pakistan. A new threat has come from Pakistan today, a nuclear threat. In an interview to the RT television broadcaster, one of Pakistan's ambassadors said that Pakistan was considering the full spectrum of its options, including the nuclear one. This nuclear bogey has been busted by India many times before. Meanwhile, the military drills by the Air Force and the Navy, we have already seen them, including dramatic landings on the Ganga Expressway in Uttar Pradesh and the Navy firing anti-ship missiles off the coast of Gujarat, where it's only some nautical miles away from the Pakistan Navy also conducting a drill of its own. The Prime Minister has been meeting with the Air Force Chief, the Navy Chief. He's met with the Defense Secretary today. He's met with the Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister, Omar Abdullah. And the time has come for us to look at what India's next steps might be. Our guest today is Ajay Bisaria. Ambassador Bisaria has been, among many of his other avatars, High Commissioner to Pakistan at a very troubled time. He has seen firsthand not just what happened during the Pulwama attack, but also the Balakot strikes. And then, of course, he has the distinction, I would say the proud distinction, of being asked to leave Pakistan after India abrogated Article 370. You can find many of those riveting tales in his book on the subject, Anger Management. Thank you so much, Ambassador Bisaria, for making time. Let me start by asking you where you think we stand today. It has been 13 days since the Pahalgam terror attack. I'm not one of those sort of studios that is going to say, where's the military action? It's quite clear that this is being calibrated. It's being managed on the escalatory ladder. And in some ways, keeping Pakistan sweating and guessing has its own consequence and its own cost for Pakistan. But if you were to step back and take an overview of where we stand today, how would you analyze where we stand today?
Thanks, Barkha. Great to join your show finally. I would say we are in the middle of a conflict. If you look back, as you said, at 22nd April and Pahalgam, what we have is a first level escalation by Pakistan, because immediately we have overwhelming preliminary evidence of the cross-border linkages with Pakistan, as also an unmistakable pattern which you and I have been watching and the whole country has been watching for decades. So this attack was part of a series of attacks that India has seen. But as you said, this has a ring of Pulwama and Uri, which were attacks on security forces. But it also had a great deal of resonance of the Mumbai attack, because it was an attack on innocent civilians. So if you look at the pattern of this century alone, we've had, if you see the 5 or 6 major attacks, 2001 on Parliament, then 2008, Mumbai, 2015, Pathankot, 2016, Uri, 2019, Pulwama. This is part of a series of attacks. And each time the Indian response has been different. So we saw Operation Parakram after 2001, after 2008. We saw global diplomacy. I've argued that was not enough. There was no kinetic action there. 2015, we even had a joint investigation along with Pakistan. We invited them to investigate this. The narrative of a non-state actor was still active there. And then 2016 and 19, we shifted the paradigm with hot pursuit of terrorists and taking direct action. Now, this time around, in the first suite of actions, we had a very significant step, which you talked about in your opener, which is the Indus Waters Treaty. That is a treaty that stood unmolested for 65 odd years. And it survived 3 wars and multiple terrorist attacks and so on. But now India has taken that step. And I think all this adds up to one factor, which is that each time such a thing happens, India needs to look for accountability and justice, which it does. The operation investigation is still on. And you look for deterrence to set it up so that the next such event does not happen. Arguably, the deterrence broke down, but you have to remember that deterrence also worked for a few years so that Pakistan did not do it. But now, for reasons perhaps internal to Pakistan, despite that deterrence, the Pakistan army saw some benefit in trying to provoke a skirmish with India. So I think where we are is in the middle of a conflict where Pakistan has escalated, India has taken a series of steps, and perhaps some more steps are in the offing.
Ambassador Bisaria, I'll get to the Indus Water Treaty in just a moment. I was able to travel to the Wular Lake. You're seeing those images, and talk to Kashmiris on the ground. And not many people in the rest of the country know that Jammu and Kashmir has always been against the Indus Water Treaty. Its assembly has passed unanimous resolutions in the past saying the treaty has never benefited the people of Kashmir. They want more water for more hydroelectric projects for their own development. And so literally every Kashmiri I spoke to in the area welcomed the decision of the government to suspend the treaty. But I want to just come to this idea of deterrence for a few years. I would agree with you. I think the deterrence that allowed an improved security situation in Kashmir, allowed better economic opportunities for the people of the valley, has a large part of what we're seeing today in the response from the people of Kashmir, who are realizing that their improved lives have been destroyed by Pakistan. And to that extent, you referenced an internal dynamic at play, perhaps Asim Munir trying to remain relevant, beleaguered by Baluchistan, beleaguered by the popularity around Imran Khan, despite him being put away. Do you believe Pakistan has miscalculated? I mean, obviously Munir knew. He's an army chief, even if of Pakistan. Obviously, he knew he does something like this, he plans something like this, he backs something like this, and there will be retaliation. Did he want this? Did he want to provoke India into retaliation?
I would argue he would have wanted to have this retaliation, because that would be part of his calculation. But equally, it's a huge, grave miscalculation, of the kind Musharraf made in Kargil, and of the kind that weak Pakistani generals, to improve their own standing and their brand, have done through the history of this relationship. 2008, just after Musharraf leaves, the later Musharraf was on better behavior than the earlier Musharraf. What his successor Kayani did was possibly something that is to burnish your reputation as a new general and as someone who is in charge. So I would say that it may have burnished Asim Munir's personal brand. He may have betted that despite this deterrence, despite the danger of a huge Indian action, what he might be able to achieve is that a skirmish India might have everyone who wants or who hates him, who dislikes him, to rally around the flag and support him. He even managed to get a statement out of Imran Khan from jail. Maybe that was Imran Khan's get out of jail card, supporting him. But what it really classically does is the old idea of the Pakistan army thinking tactically a couple of steps and not thinking strategically 5 or 7 steps ahead. So I think it is a miscalculation for Pakistan, but perhaps a very calculated maneuver by Asim Munir. And the fact that India is in no hurry to respond is that India has understood, India is gaming this sort of internal dynamic within Pakistan.
So let me come to the nuclear bogey. Pakistan has always calculated or counted on the fact that because India and Pakistan are both nuclear armed nations, the West will invariably contain India's right of response, or will at least, if they can't stop it, they will at least weaken it. And so it should come as no surprise to us that there has been yet another brazen nuclear threat. This is one of Pakistan's diplomats talking to Russian state television. Take a look.
Well, when it comes to India and Pakistan, we do not get involved into this debate of numerical strength. We in Pakistan will use the full spectrum of power, both conventional and nuclear. And I'll stop there.
What do you make of that, Ambassador Bisaria? It isn't the first time that the nuclear threat has been made since the Pahalgam terror attack. One of Pakistan's ministers went so far as to coarsely say the missiles are not for Sajawat, they're not models, they're for use. Now you have, a more sophisticated articulation of the same point. What is the purpose in Pakistan making nuclear threats? Is it calculating, or is it hoping that the world will then, dial the hotline to FM Jaishankar, to Prime Minister Modi, and say, step back from the brink? Is that the calculation?
Barkha, as you said, this is neither new nor surprising. We've seen that early in the game, in any conflict situation, Pakistan likes to do some nuclear saber rattling, some nuclear signaling to try and demonstrate that its nuclear threshold is way below it actually is. And that bogey has been called out by India by taking sub-conventional action against terrorism in the past. We saw this, and if you step back and look at the dynamic of India-Pakistan relations since we have been overtly nuclear powers from 1998, the understanding initially was that perhaps this nuclear parity will give Pakistan the incentive to drop terrorism, because now suddenly it had a parity in one domain, even though it was very weak compared to India in the conventional domain. And therefore, it would perhaps behave better, perhaps as the two nuclear superpowers did during the Cold War, with a mutually assured destruction kind of theory. But what we saw instead was a very odd behavior that under the nuclear umbrella, Pakistan decided to be a persistently revisionist power. So in 1999, you had Musharraf attempting the Kargil misadventure right after the countries went nuclear. In 2000 and 2001, you saw Pakistan attempting terrorism under the nuclear umbrella. And I think this is what has continued. Instead of actually being a nuclear responsible power, Pakistan tries to demonstrate very early in a conflict that its nuclear threshold is in fact way lower than it actually is. It's hugely irresponsible to make these comments. So, it cannot then lay a claim to being a responsible nuclear power if it's doing this saber rattling. And the second point you brought out is again very valid, that in an India-Pakistan conflict, given that both countries are nuclear, fairly early in the escalatory ladder will you find global powers coming in to try and help with the de-risking of the region, the de-escalation, and that is inevitable. But despite that, we saw the last couple of times that India did find the subconventional space to give us a persuasive subconventional response and set up deterrence even in the subconventional area.
The interesting and the important thing is that so far only one country has spoken specifically about striking the other and used the word strike. I'm not saying that India will not strike Pakistan. I'm just saying that articulation in those words has come from Pakistan. And Pakistan's Defense Minister Khwaja Asif made those comments in the context of the suspension of the Indus Water Treaty. He was asked by a journalist, what will you do if India goes ahead and builds a structure to contain water, to be able to at least influence the flow of water? And he said, if they build any structure, we will strike that structure. I mean, he was as specific as that. This saber rattling? What's going on here? What did you make of Khwaja Asif's comments on the Indus Water Treaty?
Khwaja Asif is doing a lot of disservice even to his own country. I mean, it's a hugely irresponsible statement to make, but I don't even know if he's a part of a systematic signaling coming from his country, or he's just a loose cannon who's going about saying whatever pleases him. He's the same minister who went on global channels to make some ridiculous claims.
He said we did the dirty work of the West and admitted using terrorism as state policy, basically.
Absolutely. So he was doing that. He also claimed completely made the incredible claim that there's no Lashkar-e-Taiba in Pakistan, that they've been eliminated and so on. So I think he's been making comments which are being scoffed at, which are being laughed at. But it also talks of a wider phenomenon, that this is an army operation, whatever happens here, and the civilians in Pakistan are often clueless, and they scramble, and then they try to make the best of defending what their army has already done. So I think he is not just using the talking points given from Rawalpindi from the army, but adding his own masala to it and making a complete mess of it. So I think this is not very persuasive signaling, and it reflects to me more panic than a consistent signal coming from his country.
Let's talk about the suspension of the treaty. The treaty, as you said, has survived 4 wars, counting Kargil, multiple phases of conflict between India and Pakistan, because the thinking in India up until this point was that the state is the adversary, the deep state is the adversary, the security establishment is the adversary, the people of Pakistan are not India's adversary. And I don't think India is saying today that the people of Pakistan are adversary even now. I think what we're saying is that the people of Pakistan are being punished by the policies followed by their military. How do you see the significance of this suspension? And, we've seen these images released on Doordarshan as saying that at the Salal Dam, the gates have been closed. There was some skepticism, it will take a long time to actualize any impact of this. How do you see in the last few hours, we've seen reports out of Baglihar, we've seen reports from the Salal Dam, and these are official agencies that are saying this. This isn't speculated. This is officially on Doordarshan. How do you see what has happened with the Indus Water Treaty and the concern that it would take too long to enforce any part of its suspension? It doesn't look like that by these images.
I would say these are important signals. And as you said, historically, this treaty has been an example of upper riparian generosity. that there was only 20% of the water coming to India, 80% of being made available to Pakistan, and it was seen as a confidence building measure. It was seen, and it was certainly an example of generosity. But now, given the materially changed situation, this persistent revisionism, persistent recourse to terrorism, the circumstances change. And what I think India is doing right now is signaling that this treaty can be deployed even in the very near future to make some changes, some tweaks. But what we need to have is a medium-term strategy of having available more storage, more dams, more canals, which will take a while to come up. But even in the short term, some measures are possible. But for them to be effective, you need a medium-term kind of positioning. But having said that, we must also recognize what India did was place it in abeyance. So this is now a lever in the conversation. There could be a conversation potentially with Pakistan should they say that we are going to change our ways completely, abandon terrorism completely. That
I mean, in which lifetime do you see that happening?
Well, and so theoretically, you can calibrate the release of the waters to the behavior on terrorism, and I think that would be the signal that India would be sending. But right now, it's a signal of resolve that nothing is out of bounds now. Everything is on the table. Everything can be used because of the latest outrage by Pakistan, and all methods, kinetic, non-kinetic, diplomatic, will be deployed by India.
How do you read these headlines of Salal and Baglihar? We understand that it's not a tap, it's not a faucet that can be turned on and off. But there are ways, from what I understand from experts, whether it's in the absence of data sharing or in changing the amount that you release or hold back every day, for this to have some consequences without building new dams. Am I correct in this understanding? Because it's a highly specialized subject.
I'm no hydrological expert, but having watched some of these conversations of the Indus commissioners and so on, it does make a difference. Data being shared in the short run, apart from the western rivers, there was excess water flowing even from the eastern rivers into Pakistan. But India is permitted to build run-of-the-river projects even on the western rivers. But there can be some signaling, some moves that make some difference on the ground during even in the short term. But the real difference in terms of having the ability to significantly alter water flow will, I believe, take a medium term of 3 to 5 years.
Now, Pakistan always claims or justifies its policy of terror by claiming to speak for the people of Kashmir. And one of the important things, Ambassador Bisaria, that has happened this time is the complete revulsion in Kashmir at what happened in Pahalgam. But also when it comes to the Indus Waters Treaty, Jammu and Kashmir, as I mentioned, has in the past, the assembly, when it was a state, has passed unanimous resolutions actually asking for this treaty to be scrapped. I want to play out for you and for our audience a short clip. I had an opportunity to travel to the Wular Lake. The Wular Lake is Asia's second largest freshwater lake. The Tulbul navigation project of India has already, well before the suspension of this treaty, been a bone of contention between India and Pakistan. But here at the Wular Lake, I had a chance to speak with the local people there and how they perceived this decision to hold the treaty in abeyance. And I'm just going to give you a sense of at least one voice from the ground, because that's all we have time for right now. Take a look.
इस समय हम वुलर लेक पर हैं और वुलर लेक को नेविगेट करने के लिए एक बोट में ये जर्नी कर रहे हैं. The Wular Lake is the second largest freshwater lake in all of Asia, and it's a key component of the now suspended Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan. India has suspended it in response to the Pahalgam terror attack and Pakistan's role in that attack. जिस दिन हम यहाँ मौजूद हैं, उसी दिन पाकिस्तान की तरफ से एक वॉर मॉन्गरिंग बयान आया है और वो बयान ये है कि पाकिस्तान ने धमकी दी है कि अगर इंडिया ये कोशिश करती है कि वो किसी भी स्ट्रक्चर को बनाने की कोशिश करती है जो कि वाटर का फ्लो पाकिस्तान में जाने से रोकने की कोशिश करे या उसको कम करने की कोशिश करे, then Pakistan will strike that structure as India looks at military options against Pakistan along with non-military. And the most significant non-military action that India has taken is the decision to hold the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. Water today is part of the arsenal. It is a weapon by India against Pakistan. And it is, some say, the most effective weapon. जम्मू और कश्मीर के जो लोग हैं वो हमेशा ही इस ट्रीटी के खिलाफ रहे हैं और जम्मू और कश्मीर असेंबली में एक रेजोल्यूशन भी पास हुआ है, यूनानिमस रेजोल्यूशन, सभी पार्टीज ने उसका सपोर्ट किया कि इस ट्रीटी को अब स्क्रैप कर दीजिए, रद्द कर दीजिए। और आज हम उस मुकाम पर हैं, उस क्रॉस रोड पे हैं जहां पे इंडिया ने ये ट्रीटी को सस्पेंड किया है। इस ट्रीटी के अंतर्गत 6 रिवर्स की पानी की बात है, लेकिन उसमें जो जरूरी रिवर्स है इंडस, झेलम और चिनाब, उनके बारे में हम बात करते हैं क्योंकि उनका फ्लो पाकिस्तान में जाता है एंड इट कैन डायरेक्टली इंपैक्ट इन अ सेंस द एग्रीकल्चरल इकोनॉमी ऑफ पाकिस्तान। मेरे साथ भी एक लोकल एक्सपर्ट है, एक लोकल यहाँ कम्युनिटी लीडर है और दूसरे शिकारे में भी आपको नजर आएंगे जो यहाँ के लोकल कम्युनिटी के लोग हैं, उनका क्या कहना है इस ट्रीटी को लेकर, याद दिलाते हुए कि कश्मीर के लोग हमेशा ही, जम्मू कश्मीर के लोग हमेशा ही इस ट्रीटी के खिलाफ रहे हैं।
तो हम देखते हैं कि एक जो इंडस वाटर टेरिटरी है उसमें सबसे बड़ा शिकार जम्मू कश्मीर रही है। किस वजह से रही है? देखें आप, हमारे यहाँ देखें कि हमें जो है इलेक्ट्रिसिटी बहुत क्राइसिस है, हालांकि हमारे यहाँ बहुत अच्छे प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं बिजली के, बहुत
लेकिन ये ट्रीटी नहीं होती तो और हाइड्रो इलेक्ट्रिक प्रोजेक्ट्स हो सकते थे।
मैं वही कहना चाह रहा हूँ कि अगर ये टेरिटरी नहीं होती तो हमारे यहाँ और बहुत सारे प्रोजेक्ट बनते और हमारी जो इलेक्ट्रिसिटी क्राइसिस है यहाँ जम्मू कश्मीर में, वो जो है हमें 24/7 जो है हमें बिजली मिलती और उससे हमारे वसाइल बढ़ जाते और बहुत सारी चीजें होती। और ये हम इस चीज के तभी खिलाफ रहे कि ये जो इंडस वाटर टेरिटरी है इसको आप कैंसिल कर दें।
So he goes so far as to say इसको cancel कर दें, and this is just one voice I played out for you. Multiple voices on the ground have always sort of made this argument, and of course it never has in fact been cancelled. Ambassador Bisaria, is this is signaling? This, as you said, is calibrated non-kinetic sort of non-kinetic signaling. My question to you is it enough by itself? I mean, it's clear that the armed forces have been greenlit for kinetic responses. That's clear at a time, mode, and place of their own choosing. But by itself, will it be enough? Because, you outlined how every time the response has been different. Pathankot, India actually cooperated with Pakistan investigators. Uri, we saw the surgical strikes. Balakot, when you were in Pakistan, we saw the Balakot strike follow Pulwama. Now, the official announcement from India thus far, the biggest announcement, non-military announcement, has been the suspension of this treaty. Does it, in your estimation, need to be coupled most definitely with military action, or not necessarily?
I think that will always remain an ambiguous move, because it is and should remain unclear to Pakistan and to the world and even to ourselves what exactly will happen. Because if kinetic action has to take place, it has to be done with some degree of surprise, some degree of secrecy. So I would make the argument that we've tried a whole lot of different measures in the past, and there's a whole menu of options. So there is air, there's sea, there is ground strikes, there are multiple other domains, there are economic coercion means, there are diplomatic means, and within those is the Indus Waters Treaty. And perhaps this is the most potent move and the strongest move that India has made ever against terrorism. And therefore, you could make the argument that you could use all of these measures, just the treaty alone, or anything else, as a blend, but your purpose will be one that you will want to set up deterrence to ensure that the next Pahalgam does not happen. Now, which way you achieve it can be debated, can be done. Even on your show recently, someone talked of the Manika Model,
Yeah.
because
Atta Hasnain, General Atta
yes,
Hasnain said that. Yeah.
yes. So the kinetic action can be, will be at a time and place and manner of our choosing. It could come in 10 months or 2 days, or it could perhaps not be exercised at all, as we did in Operation Parakram, making Pakistan sweat all this while. So all these options are on the table and should be on the table. And what finally sets up that deterrence is what the government will know best, or government will make the best assessment of, and use that method. I made the point that kinetic action is essential as part of this suite of measures to set up a very strong deterrence. But every other blend of options is also possible.
So let me ask you this. You said military action could come in 10 months or 2 days, and we don't know and we should not know, and that's correct. And the Manekshaw model, of course, is a reference to how Indira Gandhi took her time in 1971, 9 months to be precise. Here, my question is, General Atta Hasnain, who came up with this model, said, look, you've also got to you've also got to prepare defensively. What if Pakistan backs another terror strike, God forbid, in the Kashmir Valley, while we are exploring these kinetic options? Because the whole thing about asymmetric warfare is that the small guys, it's like the Chinti and the Hathi kind of thing. Pakistan is not fighting up front; it's sending proxies, and therefore it's not actually a war. It's asymmetric warfare, and therefore you can't necessarily war game it very precisely. So, is there a concern that a delay in response could be to Pakistan's advantage? Or is it, as Atta Hasnain argues, that you're actually bleeding them? The longer you prolong this, you must have seen the Moody's forecast on Pakistan. We all know that Pakistan is living on borrowed money. So is there also deep strategy in actually prolonging this conflict? Because Pakistan's having to mobilize, Pakistan's having to move its troops, Pakistan, is already beleaguered. How do you see it? Is there a time limit? Should there be a time frame?
Absolutely, there should be no time frame. And we talked of 71, Indira Gandhi waiting it out 9 months. And let me take you back to 2001. We had a dastardly, spectacular attack on the Indian Parliament, and for various reasons, the government of the day decided that we launch Operation Parakram, which means there was a credible threat of force. And then the then National Security Advisor, Brijesh Mishra, used to say, the threat of force has to be so credible that you start believing it yourself. You should yourself believe and be ready to take it down, up the escalatory ladder to the next level. So, what I think the argument would be is that is an option that remains available, that also is something that gets the adversary into a great deal of pain, the constantly being aware of an upcoming strike, but not knowing when and where and how it will come. So I think there is also certainly merit in that. But, you mentioned Kashmir, and let me come back and bolster the argument you make. I left Pakistan right after Article 370. And you've been on the ground just now. I was on the ground 2 years ago. I went for the G20 meeting and another time to Kashmir. And I agree with you. There's a sea change. There is a dramatic change in Kashmir, and which is perhaps one of the reasons why it entered Pakistan's calculus. We cannot let the Indians get away with complete normalcy in Kashmir. And since then, of course, there have been these two elections, the general elections and the Kashmir elections. There's the moves we made, the deterrence we set up, created the space for democracy to prosper, and for healing to take place in the Kashmir Valley and in Kashmir in general. So what we need to do is, again, reimpose that counter-infiltration and counter-terrorism grid, which was so effective in 2019 to prevent Khoon ki Nadiyan, the rivers of blood that were supposed to flow if India ever changed Article 370. And we must reimpose that sort of deterrence externally and the kind of security internally for this process to continue. Because here, I think, despite this setback, Kashmir is winning, India is winning, because the normalcy process is going on. Yes, it's a while away, but we are on that journey, and we have to make every effort to ensure that the journey continues. But on your question on whether there can be another attack, of course there can be another attack, and of course attacking soft targets is not hard. A couple of guys with machine guns in a sleeper cell can do that. But we need to be prepared for that. We need to pay the price for that. We need to be secure enough for that not to happen. And whether or not we strike, that kind of event can happen. So, it's a matter of both setting up deterrence and stepping up security.
Ambassador Bisaria, since you've spoken about the improved situation in Kashmir, I do want to actually link it to the 370 abrogation and the deterrence post-Pulwama, which allowed this kind of economic boom relatively to take place, and which somewhat explains, I'm not saying economics is the only response. I think even on a humanitarian basis, so many Kashmiris I met are traumatized. But some of the moving accounts that have emerged are of local Kashmiri heroes, including that of a shawl seller, for example, who was sitting at home. He wasn't even at the site, and he read in a WhatsApp message that there was this happening, and he ran to the site, and we then all saw the viral video of him. There he is, running down with an injured boy on his back. And with your permission, I'm just going to play out what he said to me. He said, "I'd rather that they have killed me than kill the tourists, and I'm going to mark this day as a Black Day every year." I've been covering Kashmir for literally 28 years now. I have never seen these kind of voices so strident, so direct. Take a look.
सजाद जी, सबसे पहले तो मैं कहना चाहूंगी कि पूरे देश ने वो वीडियो देखा जिसमें हमने देखा कि आप नीचे आ रहे हैं पहाड़ के और आपके पीठ के ऊपर एक इंजर्ड टूरिस्ट है। तो आप वहां कैसे पहुंचे? शायद आपने एक व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप में एक मैसेज देखा फॉर हेल्प, जरा बताइए क्या हुआ।
नहीं, एक्चुअली हम घर पे बैठे हुए थे, हमारी जो मौसी भी लगती है वो चाची भी लगती है, उसका डेथ हुआ था।
आपने जब ये सुना तो आप घर में ही रह सकते थे। बहुत से लोग हैं जो कहते भाई गोली चल रही है, हम नहीं जाएंगे, हम तो घर में बैठेंगे।
हाँ, वो तो बात सही है, लेकिन मतलब मैं अपने आप पे ये मतलब प्राउड फील करता हूँ कि ऊपर वाले ने उस समय मुझे मतलब ऐसा हिम्मत दिया कि मैं वहाँ पे चल पाया, और मैंने उन मासूमों का जो उन मासूमों का कत्ल हुआ उनको जो वहाँ पे पड़े उनको मदद किया है।
अच्छा, देखिए मुझे बताइए कि बहुत लोग तो डर जाते हैं।
जी।
आपके मन में ये क्या बात है कि आप वहाँ जाके हेल्प करना चाह रहे हैं?
इंसानियत का कत्ल हुआ है, मतलब बेगुनाहों का जान चले गए, मतलब उससे अच्छा हम ये बोलते हैं, अगर वो जिन्होंने ये हरकत वहाँ पे किया, उससे अच्छा होगा हमारे घर पे आके हम दरवाजा खोल के हमको मार देते, वो हमको मंजूर है। हम जो था, अगर हमारे फैमिली मेंबर में कोई किसी का डेथ होता, हमको उतना फील नहीं, उतना दुख नहीं होता जितना वो भाई लोगों का हुआ, क्योंकि उनको पता नहीं था। हमको वो हमारे मेहमान थे, आए हमारे मेहमान है, हम उनको यहाँ पे सेवा करते हैं। बेगुनाहों का जान हुआ, हमको भी बहुत दुख है। ये हमारे दिल पे एक दाग लगा है, वो कभी जो जख्म लगा है वो कहीं से सिया नहीं पाएगा हमारे दिल में। और ये जो दिन है हमारे लिए वो एक ब्लैक डे बन जाएगा। हर साल उनको हम ब्लैक डे की तरह मनाएं।
आप इसको हर साल
ब्लैक डे मनाएं, और ये मंजर हम कभी जो हमने आंखों से देखा ना, ये हम कभी जिंदगी में नहीं भूलेंगे। और हम ऊपर वाले से यही दुआ करते हैं कि ऐसा मंजर किसी को भी जिंदगी।
So he's saying that I feel more pain here than I would have had someone killed somebody in my family. I wish they'd killed me instead. I'm going to mark this as a Black Day. Now, I mean, this is significant, and he's not isolated. There's another local hero, the Poniwala, who tried to wrestle with the terrorists by snatching their rifles, Adil Hussain, who was killed. I'm not discounting the fact that there is local support. 2 of the 4 terrorists are local. So I'm not trying to romanticize this, but I'm saying black flags at Lal Chowk, these kind of voices, this weakens Pakistan as well. it weakens Pakistan enormously, these kind of voices, Ambassador.
Absolutely. I agree. And you know what this story is demonstrating? That one of the central purposes behind this terrorist attack is defeated. What were the multiple objectives? One of them was to foment communal trouble in India by the selective targeting. That hasn't happened. So India has defeated that objective. The other was to create rifts between Kashmiris, non-Kashmiris within Kashmir and change the whole narrative of a normalizing Kashmir. That the Kashmiris have defeated. You know, you've been reporting of the kind of spontaneous, organic move within Kashmir, condemning the terrorism,
Yeah.
which has hit the economy. So I think all those objectives have been defeated, and they would certainly have been in the mind of the planners, and they would certainly be deeply disappointed that they weren't able to engineer the kind of riots they did, for instance, in the 90s. If you remember the bombings in 92 and the communal riots that took place in India, this has been defeated by India. So I think that is also important. Apart from setting up deterrence, setting up security, we are ensuring that our polity, our society is also not affected by this traumatic act of terrorism.
Ambassador Ajay Bisaria, I want to take you back now to Pulwama and Balakot as chronicled by you in your own book, Anger Management, right? These were very, very tense times. And, I think we have some of the excerpts there from your book. And there is that now very quoted famous account when the Prime Minister actually refuses to take any call from Imran Khan. He references a Qatal ki Raat, and how then the message is sent that if Abhinandan is harmed, India will escalate, right? It was very, very clearly said that if our Indian Air Force officer at that time, who was detained by the Pakistanis, if anything happened to him, India was very, very willing to escalate. This is all in Ambassador Bisaria's book, Anger Management. When you look back at that time and you look at what's happened today, so much has changed in Pakistan, and yet nothing has changed, right? Imran Khan was prime minister then. He made a big show overtly of releasing Abhinandan Vartaman. But as your book captures, India had already read the Riot Act on military escalation behind the scenes. Today, Imran Khan is in jail. He remains by far the most popular politician in Pakistan. A direct challenge to Asim Munir. Baluchistan is challenging Asim Munir. So if you had to look back at that time, as you describe in your book, and look at today, from then in 2019 to today, 2025, what has changed and what has not changed in Pakistan?
So I think that is exactly the point. Much of it remains the same. There's a strong sense of deja vu that even Pakistan watchers like you will feel. And compared to the Pahalgam and Pulwama events, much of the events unfolded the same way. But what India managed to do the last time was to dominate the escalation ladder. There was a very credible threat of escalation by India, and that led Pakistan to hunt for an off-ramp and get off the ramp and defuse the situation. It became essential because there was a very credible threat of serious escalation by India. So, but each such incident will be different. Each time you are on this escalation ladder, there can be a different sort of dynamic that comes. The Abhinandan episode was one of the unforeseen events of the fog of war. It wasn't expected that an Indian pilot would be there, but the way India improvised and the way the situation developed, there was no option for Pakistan but to blink and return the pilot. But this time you have an army chief who is possibly more determined and possibly was spoiling for a fight, because he would have factored in that this kind of escalation will take place, but maybe by doing certain things and by escalating himself, he feels that his own internal position could be strengthened vis-a-vis his own army, where he's deeply unpopular, vis-a-vis the people who really wanted Imran Khan and wanted the army to get the hell out of their country and their polity. But he's there, he's trying to control the situation. He's trying to become a cross between Zia and Jinnah in trying to, take Pakistan, use the right wing kind of sentiment to strengthen his position in what used to be called the Mullah military alliance. So I think he is, it's a different dynamic. And each time there would be a different dynamic. And the fact that India understands Pakistan very well means our planners are looking at it, factoring in both the internal dynamic and the all the dynamics of escalation that we saw in the past.
Before we come to some final questions on the geopolitics, when you say Munir is trying to be a cross between Zia and Jinnah, is he acting from cunning, from a desperate need to survive, to remain relevant, or is he acting from being a radicalized entity? There are those who, General VP Malik, for example, who say that Pakistan's army is increasingly radicalized, is increasingly Islamized, right? You had Bajwa, for example, the former army chief, and you write about this in your book, trying to actually say, Pakistan's going to go bankrupt. He met a group of Pakistani journalists and he said, you know what, I think we've got to let this Kashmir thing go because we're going to be bled dry. And we saw what happened to him. Now, when you look at Munir, what do you see? Do you see a tactician or do you see a jihadist?
I see a person with a lack of imagination. I think we saw this in the past. He may be personally somewhat more religious because he's a Hafiz a Quran and so on. But when he was Bajwa's DGISI, he had a different body language. He was following the path. And Bajwa saw the writing on the wall and decided that the Bajwa doctrine was about shifting from geopolitics to geoeconomics, saving Pakistan and trying to make a more normal Pakistan. But now, with his back to the wall, Asim Munir is reversing all that, regressing, and a lot of what he's doing is not really ideological, but the Munir doctrine is about saving Munir. He's already declared himself as possibly the army chief for life, because he's given himself a 5-year term, extendable to a 10-year term. He might just have that extended further. So I've been saying that Pakistan army chiefs are there for 3 years or 6 years or 10 years. 3 if they are normal, decent soldiers, 6 if they are somewhat manipulative, and 10 years if they do a coup. Now, without having to go through the trouble of, doing a coup, Asim Munir has a clear path of 10 years plus. But the problem is the economy is something he can't control, nor is the mood of the people who are seeing through his act. So I think he's beleaguered, and much of this crisis is of his making.
Let's end with talking about what Indian diplomats will be working on right now, because you have to, I think already there have been conversations with world leaders, but we have seen Turkey, for example, Turkey's warships have docked at Karachi port earlier. If we can please bring up those images. There it is, naval ship docks in Pakistan. We have seen China lending aggressive rhetorical support. China has thus far not got militarily involved in any conflict between India and in Pakistan. But post Galwan, there are some theories, including by sort of geopolitical commentators, that what if China is the sort of mastermind behind all this? How concerned should we be about China? How do you look at how the decks are stacking up on the diplomatic sort of chessboard?
Well, first, I think we need to be clear that any of the kinetic moves is something that India will be involved with on its own. There won't be any other player. It'll be a bilateral India-Pakistan action. We saw that.
Sorry to interrupt. So the Iranians arriving here, giving an official statement that they're coming here after talking with Pakistan officials is just self-deployed assumption.
Yes. So, I'm talking of the kinetic action. Now, on the diplomacy, there is always a move when Pakistan tries to dredge in a lot of people to try and restrain India from taking the next step. So that is inevitable. But I think the major powers understand this dynamic. The US and even Russia and others, I think the message I would read from all the statements that are coming in: we are with you in this moment of terrorism. We understand that you might have to take some action to set up your deterrence or against these terrorists or in hot pursuit of them, but please don't let it escalate beyond a point. And that is all that they can say publicly. What they say to our diplomats privately, I suspect, would be a little more supportive and saying that, look, do what you have to. This is what Pompeo is supposed to have told our leaders in Pulwama time. Do what you have to, and then please de-escalate it quickly, because we don't want it running away. So, that is an understandable position. But I think India will have a lot of global support in doing whatever it needs to do. And Indian diplomacy has been on hyperdrive, trying to make this point globally. And I think it was well understood during Pulwama. It'll be even better understood now.
But Ambassador Bisaria, before we let you go, about China, the one important thing is that India has had its own rapprochement process with China, which is important. But China's sort of rhetorical support, at least, to a so-called neutral investigation, which is, of course, nonsense, because, it's, I think it was Tharoor who said that it's like a thief robbing you and then asking the thief to be part of the investigation. And we've tried this before in Pathankot, and it's complete nonsense. But how concerned are you about the China factor?
The Chinese are, even the last time in Pulwama time, get dredged in by the Pakistanis very reluctantly. It's like the elder brother who's reluctantly brought into the fight. He doesn't want to get into the fight. He wants the younger sibling to do whatever he has to, but he's dredged in. So the Pakistani, I don't think the Chinese will want to get in early in the game. If there's a protracted conflict situation, the story could change. But in the initial stages of this conflict, the Chinese will want to protect their own internal dynamic with India. They've gone through a 5-year period and a de-escalation and a rapprochement that is going on. They wouldn't like that to be destabilized because of Pakistan's terrorism, which incidentally they don't approve of, because they feel that this terrorism hits them in Balochistan, in the CPEC corridor, in multiple ways. And the last time around, they had to spend a lot of political global capital in defending Maulana Masood Azhar, who was, they stood as the last country defending Masood Azhar before he was listed as a UN designated terrorist. And they finally let go of the hold after insisting that Pakistan should accept this. So I think the Chinese factor is exaggerated in my view. In early stages of this escalation, there is no chance, or I don't think the Chinese are going to step in. But if it continues, if it's a protracted conflict, then there could be a different dynamic to Chinese involvement.
And that takes me, I promise, to my last question. You're saying it could be a different dynamic if it's a protracted conflict. We don't know how this is going to play out, because we don't know what the kinetic option is going to be, and we don't know how Pakistan is going to respond to it. But with all of your experience of Pakistan, of geopolitics in general, do you believe that Pakistan is bracing itself for an all-out war? And when I say all-out war, I'm talking about a limited multi-sector war, which, even in Kargil, as General Malik's memoirs capture, he had prepared for the Punjab front to open up if the Pakistanis didn't leave Indian territory. So, do you think, with all of your understanding of Pakistan, that this near bankrupt country with not a lot of global friends could afford that kind of limited war scenario? And do you think we stand on the precipice of that possibility?
They would have factored in the possibility, because don't forget that this is a country run by an army, and the army thinks exactly in military terms. It has all the institutional memory of past conflicts, and they would have gamed and factored in that when they do an outrage of the Pahalgam kind, they could be a scenario of an escalated conflict with India. They would have gamed it, and they would be prepared for it. They would be, but their ideal scenario for the Pakistan army would be a short skirmish that gives Pakistan's army chief a greater political credibility, if you will, in his country to govern it for a longer time and get attention of many of the problems. So I think this is the game the Pakistan army would have played. But don't forget, history tells us that in a kinetic and escalation situation, anything can happen in the fog of war. Putin went to Ukraine for a 3-day in and out, perhaps, and he's there 3+ years. We thought that the Gaza conflict would end, but it's approaching its second year, despite the huge asymmetry between the parties. So I think they would have gamed it, but they would surely lose in a longer conventional conflict, and therefore they would perhaps have tried to get into the ideal situation of a short conflict, which escalates the internal credibility of the Pakistan army.
A lot to think about. As always, learned a lot from you, Ajay Bisaria, who has been, of course, a veteran diplomat. And among his many avatars, he has been India's last High Commissioner to Pakistan, with the proud distinction of having been asked to leave after Article 370 was abrogated. The author also of an excellent book. I would highly recommend it to anybody who wants to understand India-Pakistan, called Anger Management. Thank you, Master Bisaria, for talking to us, and take care. See you soon.
Thank you, Barkha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.